video is about one of the most important yet least understood concepts in world power. It is the reason why some nations rise while others fall. Every year, more and more people ask whether the United States is collapsing. Some ask with fear, others with excitement, but almost all of them ignore a basic truth. The world may look random and chaotic, yet there is one thing which quietly decides which nations rise and which nations struggle, which societies grow strong and which ones remain unstable. Very few people talk about this one force that has shaped every empire since the beginning of time. That force is not ideology, not intelligence, and not even technology. The single most important and deciding factor is geography. The land under your feet. The rivers, mountains, plains, and oceans that you did not choose but were born into. Whatever is happening in the world today, like why is China acting the way it is? Why does Africa still struggle to catch up? Why do some countries on the map always seem to get into war? Everything ultimately connects back to one defining force, and that is geography. Once you understand that geography is the real engine behind power, the story of human history starts to look very different. You begin to see patterns instead of randomness. You begin to see why some regions took off early, while others struggled for centuries. And to see that clearly, you have to go all the way back to the beginning. Imagine history as a strategy game, where the land you start with decides most of your future. The first humans emerged in East Africa and slowly spread across the planet. Over thousands of years, they settled into 6 special regions that would become the world's first great civilizations. These places were not chosen by chance. These places offered water, food, protection, and mobility long before the rest of the world could dream of it. These 6 areas were the earliest centers of civilization. The Olmec region in Mexico, the Norte Chico and later Inca regions of Peru, the Nile River in Egypt, Mesopotamia in present-day Iraq, the Indus Valley in today's India and Pakistan, and the Yellow River Basin in China. They were the first to build cities, create writing, organize governments, and grow large populations. And their success came from geography long before it came from culture or technology. Because if you wanted your ancient society to last for thousands of years, what would you choose? You would need fresh water because no population survives without it. You would want fertile land that produces food consistently. You would want natural barriers like deserts, mountains, or seas to protect you from invaders. You would want easy transportation such as long, calm rivers that allow people and goods to move. Now look at the Nile River. It provided all of these advantages at the same time. It was almost as if nature itself chose Egypt and gave it every advantage a young society could dream of. The pyramids of Egypt were not an accident. They were the result of stability, food, and security. Egypt thrived for 3 main reasons. First, the Nile was the most predictable river in the ancient world. It flooded gently and consistently, giving farmers fertile soil every single year. This allowed Egypt to feed millions of people with ease. Secondly, the river acted as a natural highway. It connected the entire length of Egypt, from the deep south all the way to the Mediterranean Sea. Boats could sail north using the current and sail south using the wind. No other ancient civilization had a transportation system this simple and efficient. Thirdly, the land around the Nile was surrounded by harsh desert. This acted like a giant protective wall. Invading Egypt meant marching across endless sand in extreme heat. Very few armies could survive such a journey. So with food, security, and transportation all working in its favor, Egypt enjoyed a level of stability that no other early civilization could match. It lasted nearly 3,300 years before foreign invasions finally toppled it. This is the power of geography. This is how it gives some nations a head start. As centuries passed, the global population exploded. At the beginning of the Common Era, around year 0, the entire world had only about 200 million people. By the year 1500, that number had reached 500 million. By 1800, the world finally hit 1 billion. Then the pace accelerated. By 1945, right after World War II, there were about 3 billion people. Today, we are well past 8 billion and still climbing. With more people came more competition. Societies began to run into each other. Borders were pushed, broken, stretched, and redrawn, sometimes every few decades. Europe became a constant battlefield where kingdoms clashed again and again. In China, dynasties rose, collapsed, and rose again as rival states fought for control. Japan cycled through periods of unity and chaos. Africa saw constant tribal and imperial battles. Then, by the 1900s, something changed. Technology transformed the world. Railways, steamships, telegraphs, airplanes, machine guns, and eventually nuclear weapons changed what nations could do and what they dared to risk. The planet became smaller and more connected, and power began to depend less on armies marching across open ground and more on industry, technology, and resources. After the 2 world wars, almost no big country expanded its borders by force. Nuclear weapons made invasion too risky. Air power made once safe natural barriers, like the mountains or deserts, far less protective. Suddenly the world map started to freeze. The borders that formed after 1945 remained mostly unchanged. And in this new, quieter global order, the nations with the strongest geography kept their advantages and turned them into long-term power. And no country gained more from this shift than the United States. Its location, rivers, coastlines, and natural defenses gave it a head start so enormous that the modern world has yet to produce a serious competitor. The United States sits on the most valuable stretch of land on Earth, and this is not a matter of biasness, pride, or politics. It's a simple fact. At the end of the last ice age, massive glaciers scraped across North America and carved out deep natural harbours. These harbours became perfect gateways for global trade. Europe received many of these as well, which is one reason European nations were able to dominate world trade for centuries. But North America received even more of them, and they were spaced along one continuous coastline. The east coast of the United States is lined with deep water ports: Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Charleston, and many more. These ports allow huge ships to come close to land, unload goods, and leave quickly. Europe had good ports too, but America's coastline offered even more, and they were easier to defend and easier to connect to the interior of the continent. However, the real treasure of the United States does not lie on the coast. It lies in the center of the country, and it's none other than the Mississippi River Basin. The Mississippi River Basin is one of the greatest geographic advantages any nation has ever possessed. This region contains some of the most productive farmland in the world. It also contains more navigable rivers than the rest of the world combined. This means boats can travel thousands of miles inland, carrying grain, timber, coal, and goods cheaply and safely. America's central river system is perfect. It is wide, deep, calm, and naturally designed for transportation. These rivers act like giant highways that nature built for free. The Mississippi empties into the Gulf of Mexico, which opens to the Atlantic. So products from the center of the United States can reach the ocean easily and cheaply, and from there they can reach the rest of the world. This is why America feeds itself better than almost any other country. This is why it became an export giant. This is why it grew rich faster than other nations. And then came the greatest real estate deal in human history, the Louisiana Purchase. In 1803, Thomas Jefferson bought the entire Mississippi Basin from France for what equals about $340 million today, and that land today is worth at least $60 trillion. This one decision locked in America's fate, because when you have so fertile farmland, perfect rivers, two giant oceans protecting you, and multiple deepwater ports, no other country can match your starting position. That is why the United States became the dominant power of the modern world. Its geography gave it a head start that no other country could match. Now let's look at the other major regions of the world, because this is where the picture becomes even clearer, because every country wants to rise, grow, and dominate. Yet not all of them can do that, because the land beneath them limits what they are able to do. Let's take China, for example, which looks powerful on the map, yet its geography places it under constant pressure. China has access to only one major ocean, the Pacific, and even that access is partly blocked by neighbors like Japan, Taiwan, the Philippines, and Vietnam. These places form natural choke points that China cannot control. 80% of China's oil passes through the narrow Strait of Malacca. This tiny waterway can be blocked by rivals at any time. One blockade could paralyze China's energy supply and its entire economy. This is why China has been spending billions of dollars to build new paths to the Indian Ocean. It is constructing highways and pipelines through Pakistan, building transport routes through Myanmar, and expanding rail networks through Central Asia. Similarly, let's talk about Russia. Russia is the largest country on Earth, yet it faces two of the harshest geographic challenges any nation can experience. First, its western border is wide, flat, and open. There are almost no natural barriers. This is why Napoleon marched straight into Moscow in 1812, and Hitler did the same in 1941. Secondly, Russia has almost no warm water ports. Most of its ports freeze in winter. Without warm ports, it cannot trade easily or project naval power. This is why Russia fights so hard in Crimea and Syria. It desperately needs reliable access to warm seas. If we talk about England, for hundreds of years it ruled the world. Geography gave it an enormous advantage. Being an island meant it had natural protection from invasion. It also had 360-degree access to the oceans, which allowed it to build the greatest navy of its time. That navy carried English influence across the entire planet. However, the invention of air power changed everything. During World War II, German bombers were able to reach London in 30 minutes. The English Channel, once a strong defence, became meaningless. As technology advanced, England's geographic strength faded. Meanwhile, the United States, with its two vast oceans and unmatched farmland, Ireland rose to take the position that Britain once held. And lastly, we have Africa, which is incredibly rich in minerals, fertile land, and natural resources, and on paper it should be a global powerhouse. But this same geography is actually a curse for Africa. Most of Africa's major rivers drop sharply as they approach the coast. These sudden drops create rapids and waterfalls that block boats from travelling from the interior to the ocean. The Congo River is the clearest example. It is long and powerful, yet no boat can travel from Central Africa to the ocean because the drop near the coast is simply too steep. Africa's coastline is also very smooth. A smooth coastline looks beautiful on a map, but it is terrible for building ports. Europe and North America have jagged coastlines filled with bays and natural harbours that protect ships from storms. Africa does not have this luxury, and as a result, building ports was difficult and extremely expensive. Without easy ports and navigable rivers, Africa struggled to build a strong maritime economy. Without shipping, global trade became limited, and without global trade, development slowed down for centuries. So once you look at the world through the lens of geography, everything becomes clearer. It all comes down to three simple questions. These questions decide the strength of any country on Earth. First, can you feed your people? Second, can you protect your land? And third, can you trade with the world? If the answer to all three is yes, then your country can rise. If even one answer is no, the country will always struggle. The United States is the only country today that answers yes to all three without any weakness. It has some of the most productive farmland on Earth, which keeps its population well fed. It has two vast oceans that act like giant shields against foreign armies. On the east, the Atlantic Ocean separates the United States from Europe by nearly 7,000 kilometers. On the west, the Pacific Ocean is even larger, stretching more than 10,000 kilometers between the United States and Asia, creating one of the strongest natural defenses any country has ever had. And lastly, it has deep water ports and open access to both the Atlantic and Pacific, which allows it to trade with every major region on the planet. However, this does not mean geography controls everything. Politics, technology, culture, and economy all matter, but geography decides the starting point. It decides the advantages and disadvantages. It decides how easy or hard the game will be. When people ask why Africa is so poor, why China is acting aggressively, or whether America is declining, they often miss the simplest explanation. The geography determines the options. Oceans, mountains, rivers, plains, and ports quietly guide the rise and fall of nations. Geography rarely changes, which is why a country's basic advantages stay the same for centuries. What changes is how well its leaders use those advantages. Follow this channel for more such informative videos. See you soon with another interesting topic. Take care.